Chapter 351, Fairy Business Your Boat? The three stared at the man. He looked like an average warrior, and a quick appraisal shows that he had no particularly outstanding equipment on him, either. He was also only level at 38, which was below the average player's level in Parallel World at the moment. That's right. The man grinned and said, "Do you three hope to travel to Linshui City?" That ferry just departed. It would take 2 hours for it to return and 2 more to set off. That means that there are 4 hours in total before all of you can get on your way, so why don't you all take my boat, instead? Where did you get a boat? Even the jack of all trades Ocean that had rich knowledge about various aspects of the game had never heard of players being able to own boats and the ilk. "Made it myself," that man replied. "Made it yourself?" The three echoed. This was something they had no knowledge of and did not know what questions to ask pertaining to the topic of boat making. There are many players waiting for the ship just now, right? Why didn't you offer them a ride on your boat?" Goofy curiously asked. That man laughed bitterly and said, "I am most willing, it is just a pity that my boat can't accommodate that many." "Oh." The three hummed. "Anyway, are you three interested?" The man asked once more. Ocean's eyes glanced over and asked, "This boat of yours, I'm afraid we won't be riding for free, are we?" The man chuckled. "Naturally, you all have to pay me to ride my boat. And how much will it cost?" Ocean pressed on. 50 gold coins, the man replied. "So expensive?" The three exclaimed in unison. The man simply added, "That system-operated ferry charges 60 gold coins a ticket." "Fuck." The system is the most despicable, Vast Lushness angrily spat. Players were already used to how Parallel World would take advantage of them, charging an exorbitant price for things and services while having a monopoly on every aspect of business in the game. Everyone was frustrated about this, yet they were helpless to fix it. Some players with keen foresight predicted that breaking this monopoly would be a guaranteed path to end-game wealth. Because everyone was very resentful over being under the thumb of the system's monopolization for so long, many reckoned plenty of people would rather let their fellow players earn that same amount than to let the system to get away with it. This player who had built his boat to start his own ferry transport business seemed to be a forerunner of this realm. The three finally took his offer to ride his boat. "Follow me, please." That man was naturally delighted now that the negotiations were successfully completed, leading these three players over to another thatched shack by the pier. "Where's the boat?" the three asked curiously. The man nimbly pulled off a layer of straw in a small, wooden rowboat, similar to those found in parks, appeared before their eyes. "This is the boat you're talking about? Would this do?" The three were skeptical. After all, the body of water the system had created was far larger than any man-made ponds people would find in parks. The water stretched out as far as the eye could see with fog in the distance. The ship made by the system was not too quick, either, but it had since been swallowed whole by the fog and was no longer visible to those standing by the shore. "Don't you worry, I've been doing this for a real long time. The water here is much calmer than you imagine. As long as I know the direction we're heading to, we'll be fine even if we're paddling over on a piece of driftwood." This man assuaged as he continued to clear out the straw covering his boat. He helplessly explained, "There's really no other way to hide this except for resorting to this method. It is considered as a handcrafted item, yet I can't fit it into my dimensional pocket. I guess it's considered to be too bulky and very heavy as of the moment. Maybe I'll be able to fit it inside once I level up more." His current expression showed how much he was looking forward to such an eventuality, dreaming about the day when he could casually carry around his boat in his dimensional pocket. After he finished clearing the straw, he made his way to the boat's stern and pushed, slipping it onto the water. "Please get on board, you three." The man smiled pleasantly when he said this. Each of them climbed aboard it. Following this, the man pulled out a long bamboo pole from his dimensional pocket, stabbed it into the water, and pushed with enough force. The little boat swiftly left the shore at this. The man continued this action with great familiarity as the boat steadily gathered speed, demonstrating just how skilled he was at the task. Similar to how Goofy had brought his real-life kung fu skills into the game and successfully integrated it into the PvP of Parallel World. "Can the three of you please hand over your payment, please?" The man continued to steer the boat as he said this, adding, "Frankly speaking, If you three up and leave upon reaching our destination later, I won't be able to chase you all by myself." The three did not say anything upon hearing this, and each of them fished out their money pouch to pay the fee of 50 gold coins. It was an amount these experts could afford. "Thank you." Once the payment was made, this person started working even harder. The boat got further and further away from land, as the water got deeper and deeper. Once the pole became entirely useless due to the depth, he kept it and took out 2 oars, which he tied together to form one double-bladed paddle. Before positioning himself at the back of the boat, he began to row with the smooth, skillful movement of a consummate professional. The novelty the three felt toward the boat and the boatman had long ended. They were no longer fixing their gaze on his way of steering, and they started to admire the view of the lake as they chatted. "Are you two friends?" Vastlushness finally asked a question she had wanted to ask back on the shore. Gufei and Ziziotion evidently knew each other, except the two seemed to share a rather unusual relationship, as though they were friends and enemies. Neither commented when they heard the question, which only made her feel the oddity of the two's relationship. She was not a nosy person, however, so she did not pursue this line of query with them. "What are you doing here?" Gufei also started questioning Ziziotion. Seeing no victims around, her appearance here was rather bizarre. "Just like you two, I'm doing the mission for traversing 4 seas. She answered. "Oh, really? Why haven't I seen you before?" He found this odd. There were over 1,000 players doing this mission, so why is it shocking to miss someone? She asked. "How did you miss the ferry, then? Didn't you arrive earlier than us?" When Gufei and Vastlushness arrived, the ship had only left moments ago. Since Ziziotion was there earlier than them by a bit, she should have been able to make it. "I was here for quite some time, but I was busy grinding on the monsters nearby and ended up mistaking the time, and missed the boarding time. I would have made it, though, if I were you," she remarked. "Huh? Blank." She explained. "Ah." He nodded. Only then did they notice the absence of rhythmic sound of splashing water from the paddling boatman and that the boat itself was slowing down. The three turned their heads to look and saw the person by the stern of the wooden boat was no longer paddling anymore and was instead holding a shield in hand. He smilingly regarded the three once he saw them look over to him. "You three, do you know how to swim? What are you trying to do?" They already realized that something was amiss. "If you don't know how to swim, I'll simply capsize our boat and you'll be in big trouble. If otherwise, how comfortable are you in the water? Can you fight while in the water?" the man asked. The three exchanged glances. Few people had tried fighting with others in the water, and Gufei was truly incapable of doing such as he did not know how to swim. He would be busy drowning the moment he landed in the water, much less even fight back. "Okay, what do you want from us, so you won't do any of that?" he asked. "Simply put, 300 gold coins for a level. You guys are players above level 38, right? I'm sure exchanging 1 level worth of experience points for 300 gold coins isn't too shabby a trade," he said slyly. "Meaning, you want us to pay 300 gold coins each?" Gufei asked. "Nope." The man shook his head, saying these two beautiful ladies here can pay me 300 gold coins each, but you, my friend, will have to pay me 1,200 gold coins since you're not just losing a level here but 4, instead. How do you know I've got park value?" Gufei was surprised by this. His park value of 29 points would cost him 4 levels a death. Hee. "There's plenty of strange equipment in this game," the man replied. 1,200 gold coins. "I don't have that much gold on me," Gufei said. "Not many do." The man clearly had a good grasp of gaming conventions. The sum of 1,200 gold coins was indeed something not many people would carry on hand or even possess. "That's why I'll let you to give me equipment as payment, instead." "So it's like that, huh?" Gufei posed as though he were contemplating. "Buddy, you seem to be stalling for time here." The man smiled. "I know who you are. To get a park value of 29 points, you're that video mage, aren't you? I know your twin incineration is powerful, and from your conversation before, it seems you know Blink. Are you thinking of using it with your twin incineration the moment I let my guard down? Given my knowledge of your identity, why would I not come prepared? You'll have to insta-kill me, or I'll immediately jump into the water, capsize the boat, and everyone will suffer. You better stay your hand, my friend. I know you're a capable man, but chalking it up as a loss once in a while is fine, too. The man spoke at length, showing his determination to succeed. At this same moment, Zizayoshin sent Gufei a private message. This guy has a shield with fire resistance trait. It's fine, he replied to her. What do you plan to do? She asked. Slay him, of course, he replied matter-of-factly. How? Exactly as how he said, he answered. Can you insta-kill him, though? He's a guardian with a fire resistance shield, she reminded. Guess I'll have to try, he said. He had never once considered compromising with such sort of people. Maybe, I can increase your chances a little. She sent over this message. Before the man's speech ended, Zizayoshin said, I'll pay. This beautiful lady here is a smart cookie. The man chuckled. Slowly take out your money pouch and toss it at my feet. The moment he picks the coin pouch up, an opening should present itself. Zizayoshin messaged Gufei even as she did what she was told. Her method of creating an opening by making the man reach out for her money pouch was truly excellent. It was just a pity that she tossed the coin pouch over to that person's feet, but his glance barely registered this action before he immediately returned his gaze on the three people in front of him. The shield was still held before his body as he slowly squatted to pick up the pouch. He must pick this up, as the system would delete and clear the items players toss in 10 minutes. The opening Zizayoshin had been hoping to create never occurred, though. Chapter 352, Row, Row, Row your boat. Zizayoshin's ploy of tossing the coin pouch did not create any opening. It did not matter, though, as Gufei merely remained unmoving from his current position. Maybe, he'll count the coins. Zizayoshin was hoping that the man would make this rookie mistake. The man, however, merely lifted the money pouch to assess its weight before putting it inside his dimensional pocket. Zizayoshin's 300 gold coins were thus expended just like that. Even if she killed this man after, she would have no way of recovering that money. Gufei also revealed a wistful expression at this point. This was not due to them failing to create an opening but due to Zizayoshin giving the man money. He plaintively said to her, "You shouldn't have given him money." He did not say this through a private message but blurted it out in the open, which clearly telegraphed to the man that Gufei was not planning to pay up. The man's expression contorted with annoyance when he heard him say this. Speaking of which, have you thought such a situation through before? Gufei was still smiling. If someone pays while the others don't, what will you do? The man's face continued to twist, as though Gufei had just poked him on his sore spot. It was evident that such thorny situations happened more often than not during his extortion career, and they usually ended rather poorly, leaving him with a mental scar as a result. Killing the players who refused to pay up after capsizing the boat and rescuing the ones who did. Such show of integrity would really go against a robber's nature. It seems you're not planning pay up, eh? The man said this through gritted his teeth. That 300 gold coins you gave him will be for naught as you'll end up in the water as well. Gufei blatantly ignored the extortionist as he spoke to Zizayoshin. Translocation, blank. He chanted the spell incantation the moment he finished talking to her. Clearly, the man had got plenty of experience dealing with this kind of situation. Although Gufei could close in on his target faster than most players, the man's way of dealing with this kind of matter had always been the same. With his shield propped before him, the man moved to enter the water. The person was apparently telling the truth. He could indeed very comfortable with being in the water. No matter how strong his opponents were, he was confident that he could circumvent them in his preferred environment. Twin incineration. He heard Gufei chant, yet his body was already bending out of the boat. He did not jump in, move to plunge into the water midair, or even dove into the water imposingly. All he did was simply lean his body forward in a great imitation of a man falling overboard and into the water. Although his posture lacked finesse, it was actually the most efficient way to get into the water. Unfortunately for him, Gufei's attack was much faster than that. Incinerate. The incantation finished, and the man, who had leaned forward to enter the water, soon realized that he was actually falling in the direction of where heat was emanating from. When he lowered his head, he saw Gufei's moonlit nightfalls came slashing in from an inconceivable angle and right where he was falling to, causing him to meet Gufei's sword directly. He wanted to dodge it, but it was already too late. With his body's falling posture, he could not correct his position in time. In the end, all he could do was look on as Gufei, who had also bent his body forward, fell toward the boat with his sword flashing out. Gufei had anticipated the man's move. No matter if the man jumped, fell, or slid, his body would still go sideways. Gufei latched onto this sliver of chance and was prepared to send his sword out. His timing was impeccable as well. Gufei lifted his sword in the exact moment that the man was in a position where he could not restabilize himself immediately. Whether it would be enough to insta-kill him or otherwise was the only thing left in suspense. Although he could not utilize his shield to block Gufei's sword slash, his high HP as a guardian might be sturdy enough to withstand it. Gufei's hand sank. The man fell onto his blade. If the man was insta-killed, he would turn into white light and quickly fade from here. However, that was not what had happened. The guardian glanced at his HP and saw clearly how close to death he was. The stone in his heart dropped as he waited for his body to fall into the water. All he needed to do now was to capsize the boat and finish off this arrogant mage. In that instant, this man planned out Gufei's end. However, he had forgotten something. He had a total of 3 clients on board his boat, so he was not simply fighting against Gufei. That moment Gufei attacked, the 2 ladies unleashed their attacks as well. A black cloud formed at the tip of Vastlushness's staff, which swiftly contracted and imprinted itself onto the Guardian's body. The Guardian had just slipped out of Gufei's blade and was about to hit the water's surface headfirst when that attack turned him into white light. Even Gufei was stunned by this. His left hand was emitting bluish light, but he never got to connect it to the Guardian's body. Recalling that spell, he turned his gaze over to the 2 ladies behind him. Zizayoshin was looking at Vastlushness with a short bow in hand. She did not manage to fire off her knocked arrow as well. Indeed, there were too many steps to accomplish before archers could launch their attacks. Zizayoshin failed to complete the shot cycle given how quick everything went. Kiss of death? You're a dark priest? The knowledgeable Zizayoshin asked Vastlushness. Vastlushness nodded her head. Priests could advance into either light affinity or dark affinity once they reached level 40, just like knights. The character's nature for either affinity would diverge with this advancement. The first skill a dark priest would learn was Kiss of Death, which was an instant cast offensive spell. While priests were dependent on others prior to reaching level 40, dark priests were capable of solo grinding thanks to this level 40 skill. However, the healing capabilities of the priests would greatly diminish if they advanced into a dark priest. Thus, dark priests were in a very awkward position as even placing them in parties became difficult to justify as a result. The offensive skill, Kiss of Death, was nothing compared to the other job classes' skills in terms of damage. As for the dark priest's healing, it was simply not on par with that of normal priests and even more so of light priests. Having a job class that could attack and heal was actually not a bad thing, but if a party was looking to maximize the efficiency of each job class, it simply had no need for this sort of all-rounder. Although the game officials assured the players that the view toward dark priests would change once their level increased and they unlocked their full potential, but, at the moment, they were still a symbol of loneliness. Those priests who had chosen to become dark priests were vexed, yet they could only grit their teeth and hope for spring to come. It was normal for ladies to choose the priest job class, but few of them would advance to the lonely path of the dark priest job class. This was precisely why Zizayoshin was quite surprised when she discovered that this lady priest before her was a dark priest. Gufei had limited understanding of support job classes like the priest, so he was unaware of the dark priest's current standing in the game. All he knew was that Vastlushness's skill was a great help and he nodded his head to express his gratitude for her timely assistance. Say, since you were planning to attack, you didn't really need to wait for any opening, so why didn't you just do what you did right away? Zizayoshin was feeling the pain of losing 300 gold coins for nothing. I was waiting, he replied. Waiting for what? I was waiting for my park value to drop to 28 points in 2 minutes before attacking, otherwise, it would jump straight back to 30 points and I need to configure the whole thing all over again. That would be really troublesome. A squad of guards chasing after him was not an enjoyable experience. Although Gufei had managed to escape before, he did not wish to go through it all over again. He might be tempted to duke it out with them if there were just 1 or 2 NPC guards, but the system would regrettably always send out a full squad to pursue those with over 30 park points. His explanation only made Ziziotion more rueful over her 300 gold coins. Her money had really been wasted. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" she asked bitterly. "That man's dead, so we'll have to row the boat ourselves." He ignored her question and merely said this. Standing by the stern of the boat and grabbing a hold of the double blade paddles, he paddled twice. The boat turned around in a circle. "This isn't as simple as it looks, it seems." He wiped the sweat off his brow and began paddling once more, turning 2 full circles this time. "Let me try." Ziziotion came over and tried a few times, but she only managed to turn the boat on a spot, except it was in the opposite direction of where the boat had turned with Gufei's attempt. "You are left-handed," he concluded. Vastlushness gave it a shot next, but the boat also only turned around on a spot. They had been turning around so much that the 3 were beginning to feel nauseated. "We seem to have a serious problem at hand," he remarked. The 2 ladies stayed quiet. "That man should have threatened us with this, instead," he lamented. "Let's untie the sculls and row this boat. That should resolve the problem," Ziziotion suggested. This was something anyone who had been to the park and rowed the boats there would know. Thus, 2 persons each took the left and the right respectively and did their best to row the scull on either side, allowing the small, wooden boat to push past the waves. Cool breeze greeted them even as the water surface reflected the worry etched on Gufei's face. Compared to that hoodlum's paddling from before, the speed at which their boat moved forward was far from ideal. The sculls were slightly long to work manually like what they were doing, making it very unwieldy. Right now, the water around them appeared boundless in every direction, which subconsciously took a toll on their morale. "Which direction should we be heading?" The 3 did not know where their destination lay. "Ask those guys on the ferry." "We can't go wrong if we chase after their coordinates," Ziziotion said. "Must you use the word chase?" "I doubt there's anything in this world slower than our boat," he lamented. "Not necessarily. Their ship didn't move fast as well when it churned away from the pier before." "Trust the system's shamelessness," Ziziotion said. Vastlushness managed to learn the ship's coordinates while the 2 were arguing, and their little boat forged ahead against the waves in the said direction. Chapter 353, Danger on the Water. As the 3 became used to working the sculls and their rowing skills steadily improved, allowing the boat to gradually pick up speed. They had to thank the game designer's choice to limit physical fatigue in-game. The 3 took turns with the 2 oars purely for fairness's sake, as not one of them really felt tired. Right now, the little wooden boat was no longer struggling with the waves but was actually riding the winds and breaking the waves. Gufei watched the waves broke through the water surface and splashed fitfully against the boat and nodded his head approvingly. "Perhaps, we can really catch up to the ferry." The 3 saw neither traces of the ship nor any land in the vast stretch of water that lay before them, which likely meant that the rest of Yunjuan City's players were still sailing along. "We may even reach Linshui City before them." He started to go overboard with his expectation. Still, everyone was happy to have this expectation. It was rather boring to drift about like this, after all. This was even more so of their need to row the boat. Only a child would find this particular task exciting. Vastlushness, who was currently lounging by the boat's bow after swapping out to rest, spotted something moving up ahead. She quickly turned her head over and excitedly announced to the 2, "There's something up ahead." "What is it?" The 2, who had their heads lowered and backs bent as they were rowing the sculls, abruptly lifted their heads to take a look. Everyone saw a shadow ahead. "It's too small to be dry land." Ziziotion was the first to feel disappointed. With the current speed their boat was going, they no longer merely looked forward to catching up to the ferry, it was now more important for them to get on dry land. The shadow became clearer the closer it got to the 3. Eventually, the trio could tell that the shadow was moving toward their small boat. Soon, another 2 similar-looking shadows began to appear in the horizon, and all of them were moving toward them. "It's a boat." The first shadow's current distance toward them finally allowed the 3 to identify what it was. The boat that they were seeing was similar to the one that they were currently occupying. Since the first shadow was a boat, it was only natural to assume that the other shadows were boats as well. Standing by the bow, Vastlushness counted up to 5 boats so far, excluding the possibility of more still hiding in the fog. "What's going on?" The three curiously examined the boats as a sense of foreboding crept on them. The boats' heading direction seemed to really be them. The boats continued to draw closer to them. The three could now say with certainty that the boats were exactly the same as theirs. 4 players were occupying each boat. Naturally, the approaching players were not each rowing like how Goofy and the ladies were. Each of the approaching boats had 1 player assigned to paddle at the back. As for the 3 others on board each boat, they were standing by the deck and holding their weapons at the ready as they glared maliciously at Goofy, Vast Lushness, and Zizi Ocean. The first boat was rapidly heading toward their 3-man boat without showing any signs of slowing down or turning away in the slightest. The 3 had every wish to evade this incoming boat. However, while they could now easily row the boat in a straight line, they were still inexperienced when it came to their boat handling, unable to expertly turn it in other directions with ease. As a result, not only did they fail to evade, the 3 unintentionally exposed the side of their boat to the incoming vessel. Besides the man who was rowing the boat, the other 3 players on board were already hunkered down with their hands tightly gripping the gunwale. Goofy and the 2 ladies were certain of these players' intention from the action they took. These 4 men were planning to crash the trio's boat by intentionally colliding with them. Since these players were expecting a violent collision, it only made sense for them to grip the boat's edge tightly. Given the speed at which the opposing boat was gliding towards them, Goofy and gang would be in serious trouble if these players managed to capsize or even destroy the boat upon impact. Moreover, even if Goofy finished these approaching men off instantly, the collision of the 2 vessels was basically unavoidable by now, as he had no way of stopping the inertia of the boat swiftly gliding in the water toward them. Without a delay, Goofy reached for a coil of rope in his dimensional pocket. Goofy had plenty of rope in his dimensional pocket, but this one he had just taken out was different from the others as it had a hook fastened on its end. Just like that sai he had, this metal hook was an item he had specially acquired from a quest to fashion himself a simple skyhook superscript 1. This was also considered as a type of ancient weaponry with a long history. While most people would associate this item to thieves, who would use it to scale walls, it was actually an important tool used during war to defend a city. Currently, this item no longer had any particular use unlike in wartime, but it could still be utilized as a soft weapon through Kung Fu. At this moment, Goofy swiftly tossed this coil of rope outward and it easily found purchase on the gunwale of the other boat further away. Quick! He cried out to the 2 ladies. The 2 ladies were jolted into action and reached out to grab a hold of the rope. Following this, the 3 firmly planted their feet by their boat's hull and tugged at the rope with all their might. The enemy boat that was hooked by the rope was forced into a different direction when they pulled at the rope. At the same time, the trio's boat was able to borrow the force behind their pull to avoid crashing with the enemy boat that was already bearing down on them. This enemy boat, which was supposed to collide with Goofy and company's boat, could no longer alter its new heading direction. Barely grazing past the stern of Goofy's boat, both vessels grinded against each other for the longest time and rocked violently as a result. "Hold on!" Goofy called out to the 2 ladies. Both did not need further prompting and just gripped the gunwale until their knuckles turned white. Goofy, for his part, swayed with the boat but never lost his balance. "How did you do that?" The 2 ladies were astonished. "Lower body Kung Fu." He smiled. He would sound ridiculous if he said that this was all due to this practice with thousand catty press or anything of the sort. When he said lower body, he was actually referring to the stability and balance he had through limb support. The strength in the lower limb was important in counteracting the pressure being applied on it, just like how a player needed lower limb strength to defend the inside line position in the basketball court. Goofy was able to maintain stability amid the boat's rocking motion as the strength he needed to counteract it was not much. Thanks to inertia, after avoiding that collision, Goofy's boat continued to drift in the direction of the hooked boat. The 3 no longer needed to worry about colliding with the hooked boat as the generated force upon impact would not be large anymore. At this moment, Goofy flourished his sword and cast descending wheel of flames on the enemy boat. The 4 players on the boat quickly huddled up as one of them raised a shield above their heads. With how slow the descent of Goofy's flame wheel, the enemies were able to get into position and wait for a while the guardian holding the shield aloft was shocked by the damage caused by his one spell. The 4 ultimately survived his attack. The priest among them quickly started bestowing heal on his comrades. Realizing that his spell would not work, He quickly followed it up with Blazing Tree of 1,000 Inferno. He was guessing that the enemy players would likely find it hard to stand atop the shield while on board a boat, yet he did not expect for them to abandon the boat altogether and threw themselves into the water without a moment's hesitation. Although the raging inferno continued to burn, its effect was significantly weakened on the water surface. This spell that should have lasted for 5 seconds only lasted for 2 or 3 seconds. The boat burned rather intensely, yet it returned to its original state after the 5 seconds ended. The 4 players' heads emerged from the water surface. Grabbing a hold of their boat, they deftly clambered on board and huddled together once more under the warrior's raised shield as the priest kept his heel up. All of them looked calm. Besides the 2 aforementioned job classes, the other 2 players were a mage and archer respectively. Each had a job class that could damage and kill from afar. However, they were forced into a defensive position by Gufei's initiation of an assault. So far, all these players had done was posing, leaping into the water, and clambering aboard after. Stabilizing themselves on a rocking boat was not easy. Even experts might find it difficult to execute attacks while on board. The enemy archer was holding the gunwale. With only one free hand, it was impossible for him to fire off an arrow. The mage managed to unleash Arctic Whirlwind with his staff, but the rocking motion of boat caused his body to follow suit. Although he did not wish to move the arm holding his staff, he was helpless in that aspect, and the rhythmic swaying of the boat caused his cast Arctic Whirlwind to forge a serpentine path outward. When the mage saw that it would miss his targets entirely, he resolutely ended his cast, and the Arctic Whirlwind dissipated into the air. Gufei took in the scene before him as the boat in front continued to bob on the water. The enemy boat that had closely brushed past Gufei and company's boat continued along the same trajectory as before. The players on board it did their best to steady themselves as they steered the boat around, otherwise, they would head in the direction of the pier that Gufei and the others had departed from earlier. 3 other enemy boats, just behind these 2 enemy boats, were currently rushing headlong toward Gufei and company's boat, seemingly picking up speed as they did so. Given their precarious situation, Gufei unhesitatingly raised his sword and cast a spell. Lightning peeled from the sky, formed itself into a wall right on the water surface, and ran right before the bow of the 3 boats. While fire spells would be weakened upon contact with the water surface, lightning spells would instead be amplified upon contact with any body of water. The splash of water on the web of electricity caused it to crackle and spark violently, the ensuing visual and sound effects adding to its grandeur. The players on board the 3 boats did not know what it was, but the atmosphere it was lending made them hesitate to approach further. However, while the electric wall remained immobile, the boats continued to drift toward it, bringing everyone on board them closer to the spell's waiting embrace with every passing second. These little wooden boats were not equipped with gear to halt their forward movement instantaneously. The players in charge of paddling these boats were already doing their best to reverse paddle, yet they were finally paying the price for being far too vigorous in their acceleration. Although their reverse paddling helped slow down the boats still continued to glide ahead. The players on board the first boat kept backing away until they were gathered on its stern, causing the boat to become imbalanced and capsize, dunking all 4 of them right into the water. When the other players on the remaining 2 boats saw this, they did not dare to back out too far. Since the boats could not be stopped and that electric wall remained lying ahead, there was only one option left for them if they did not wish to get into direct contact with it: jump. The sound of 8 players splashing into the water was heard as their boats continued straight onward. Several of them began to swim toward the boats while circumventing the troublesome electric wall. The result achieved by this one cast of electric wall was well worth celebrating. Gufei had used up all his mana by now, but vast lushness happened to be present. With a wave of her staff, she activated her mana sacrifice and Gufei's mana began to replenish. He lifted his finger and cast Blink, appearing on the boat that was still steadily rocking its passengers. Twin Incineration. Incinerate. Gufei's sword slashed out. At such a crucial moment, he no longer cared about his park value going up to 30 points. Chapter 354, The Water's Cold, 2. The poor guardian in the 4-man party still had his shield held aloft, as though he were praying to the heavens, when Gufei appeared before him after casting Blink. The guardian wanted to lower his shield to protect himself, yet Gufei's nearness to him made it so that if he brought his shield down, he would end up embracing Gufei instead of blocking him. Death was what awaited any player who showed the slightest hesitation in front of Gufei. The Guardian, and the Archer and Mage on his either side, were all slain the moment Gufei's twin incineration glided past. The priest hiding behind the three players managed to escape death temporarily. However, Gufei took special care of him once the others were dead, delivering a flurry of cuts and slashes that was as relentless as a torrential rain. Zaizayoshin was having a lot of fun right now. A total of 12 players were floating in the water, with 4 trying their best to right their capsized boat and 8 chasing after their boats as they drifted away. She continuously pulled back her bowstring to bully these players drifting in the water with her arrows. The 8 players were clearly comfortable in the water, although they were nowhere near the level of that Zhongshan character in the novel Water Margin. Nonetheless, they could not escape Zaizayoshin's shots and were hit on their heads, making their experience exceptionally unbearable. The first enemy boat that had sped past Gufei and company's boat finally corrected its course and was now making its way over. However, the players on board this vessel were stunned by the sight that greeted their return. Out of the remaining 4 boats, the players on 3 boats were all in the water, while the players on 1 boat were nowhere to be found. Only a black-clothed mage stood on that boat. At this moment, the mage turned to point to them as he chanted a spell. "Quickly dodge!" The mage on the boat cried out. From Gufei's hand movement, the players could tell that he was currently casting Blazing Tree of 1,000 Inferno. Mages were now used to subvocalize their incantations, yet experienced players could still determine the spells mages were casting from their gestures. The magic staff would be pointing upward if it was Descending Wheel of Flames, the staff would be pointing down if it was Blazing Tree of 1,000 Inferno. Seeing that Gufei was pointing toward their feet, they were certain that the spell he had just cast was Blazing Tree of 1,000 Inferno. If the spell were from any other mages, they would just grit their teeth and bear its damage. However, the Guardian who had blocked Gufei's Descending Wheel of Flames with his shield before was well aware of how terrifying Gufei's spell damage was. Naturally, he had informed the others of how unwise it was to attempt withstanding Gufei's spell. This was actually why they had leapt into the water when Gufei had cast his Blazing Tree of 1,000 Inferno back then. As such, right now, they also decided to jump into the water the moment they saw Blazing Tree of 1,000 Inferno being unleashed again. Unfortunately for them, Gufei was faking it and did not actually cast a spell. This move would not be impactful in a conventional setting, and it would, at most, make the enemies run a few extra steps. As they were currently fighting amid a body of water, this one trick had severe consequences. Once these players were in the water, returning to their boat would be difficult. This was due to how rocky the boat was, as demonstrated by the capsizing that had happened moments ago. Hence, these 4 players did not bother trying to get on board again and instead began to tread in the water while hurtling attacks at Gufei. The mage sent spells while the archer fired off arrows. With the boat's limited space, Gufei could dodge the arrows but not the AO spells. However, the damage from the AO spells of the average mage was nothing much. Gufei waved his sword to trade spells with the mage, but the Guardian instantly raised his shield to protect his companion. As such, Gufei's thunderbolt came crashing onto the man's shield. Gufei quickly followed it up with a real Blazing Tree of 1,000 Inferno, yet its damage was weakened when unleashed on water. Still, every bit of damage counted. However, these players seemed to have seen through his gimmick and swiftly ducked their heads underwater. These players had no means to dodge Blazing Tree of 1,000 Inferno while on board the boat, but they unexpectedly gained the ability to do so when in the water. Gufei felt helpless as he watched these players wait for the flames to extinguish before resurfacing and continuing their attacks on him. Just as these 4 players thought that Gufei was out of moves, his skyhook came flying out of nowhere once more and he followed through with a quick jerk. Og! The scream of the mage in the 4-man team was cut short when he drank a big gulp of water. Gufei had tossed the hook at him and it latched onto his robe. The boat rocked as Gufei tugged at the rope, pulling the mage toward him. The accessories Gufei had equipped gave him quite a bit of strength, so most mages were unable to compete with him on this front. The Guardian quickly attempted to hold the mage back, but unfortunately for them, Gufei only needed that moment. Pointing his sword in hand, Thunderbolt peeled from the sky and struck the mage, whose upper torso was above the water due to Gufei pulling him with the skyhook. The Guardian ended up grasping nothing but white light. Gufei jerked his right hand, returning the skyhook into his hand. These players were livid. It was now their turn to be out of moves. Besides the Mage's AO spells, every other attack they had left could easily be dodged by Gufei. Meanwhile, the swimming athletes that were being tormented by Ziziotion's periodical shots lined themselves up into a team, with the Guardians holding shields high and the others hiding behind them. Together, they swam toward the boat where Ziziocian and Vast Lushness were. Having taken care of the Mage in the once four-man team, he temporarily ignored the other three and turned his attention to the two ladies. He then flourished his sword out once more. Damn! Watch out! The now three-man team watched Gufei conjure another electric wall on the water with that wave of his sword. The group of 8 players hiding behind the shields was unaware of this as they swam toward the two ladies. They vaguely heard their comrades' warning and were processing it when the two guardians in front hit the electric wall with their shields. Convulsion. Severe convulsions. These players would look comical if they were on land, but since they were in the water right now, the two's full-body convulsion was starting to drown them. Noticing that his descending wheel of flames cooldown had ended, he quickly tossed out one at the players. The Guardians were unable to raise their shields to defend themselves from this spell. Meanwhile, the remaining archers, priests and mages hurriedly scattered in every direction to evade this spell. Gufei's casting time was slow, but since his targets were in the water and could not run as fast as when on land, his descending wheel of flames managed to hit 4 players. 2 archers and 1 mage instantly disintegrated. 1 priest managed to escape by the skin of his teeth. These pirates finally realized that the issue on their hands was not if they should carry on with robbing these 3 players, but if they could survive this clash. The 4 players that were still attempting to right their capsized boat came to the realization that only their 4-man team, out of 5 teams, had no casualty. They finally stopped their fruitless endeavor upon seeing that most of their comrades were no longer around and instead took cover behind their capsized boat as they carefully assessed the situation. 3 players, who were holding shields, looked as though they were out of tears shed. The 2 guardians, which had their shields stuck to the electric wall, seemed to be about to drown. The remaining mage and 2 priests, who had just managed to survive from certain death, were now in a daze. Gufei was also in pain when he saw his park value climb up to 36 points. He no longer had the heart to continue slaying. He teleported himself back to the boat he and the others were using with Blink as Ziziocian and Vast Lushness began rowing. Gufei stood dashingly by Vessel's bow as he surveyed the area around them. Those players in the water averted their gazes when he glanced by. The archer hiding behind the boat with the rest of his unscathed team gathered his courage and sneaked an arrow at him, causing Gufei to bat it away with a swipe of his sword as he casually responded with blazing tree of 1,000 inferno. The 4 players quickly ducked underwater in fear, not daring to reveal their heads even after the flames abated. Only when their HP started depleting did they dare to surface to breathe air. The 3 had already covered quite a distance with their rowing. Behind them were empty a few boats bobbing on the water surface, looking utterly desolate. The lucky survivors swam and clambered onto the respective boats. Looking at their drenched selves, they felt for the first time that the water was really cold. "Is anyone chasing us?" Vast Lushness, who was doing the rowing, asked Gufei this. The latter ran to the boat's stern to take a look and eventually shook his head. "Nope. Who are those people? What did they want from us?" She pressed on. Even with the end of this bout of PvP, they were still clueless on why matters had quickly descended into such. Not one word was exchanged between the 2 parties involved throughout the clash. "They were probably trying to rob us," Ziziocian hypothesized, explaining, "The method they've used is similar to that guy from before." From each team's job class composition, it's clear that their forte is on ranged attacks. For them to begin their attack on us by ramming our boat, I believe that they were looking to shock and awe us. They were probably attempting to show us their superiority in this type of environment so as to make it easier to convince us into giving them what they want. As for whether they would leave us dead or alive after. She threw Gufei a glance at this part. "Since you have high park value, you're the favorite target of this bunch of bandits. I doubt they'd let us off easily." "Bandits? Gufei muttered. He suddenly recalled Nightmare of Death and his lot. They were part of an organization that had a foothold in every endgame city. Do these robbers from Linshui City have any connection to that organization? Are you thinking of Nightmare of Death? Ziziyoshin actually read his mind. I am also wondering about the same thing. There's a high possibility of them being part of the same organization. Aren't you mixing in with them? Have you heard anything about this? He asked. No, I don't even know much about their operation in Yunjuan City. They are really professional when it comes to their work, like they are part of one company, she answered. Just what exactly are you two talking about? Vast Lushness, who had been listening all this time, was absolutely confused. Hence, Gufei quickly introduced her to the evil organization, TSK. Here I was wondering what's going on. Aren't such things the norm in MMOs? As someone from Y City, Vast Lushness did not consider this to be a big deal at all. Over in Y City, even the new branch of the Black Hand mercenary group engaged in such blatant robbery. Players over there were either killing or being killed and robbing or being robbed. They spent their time interchanging roles as they played on. That boat guy from before should be working with those guys. There's no other way for them to find out that a boat with people is out here if that's not the case. Gufei continued to analyze the situation. That guy is most likely out here doing a side hustle, Ziziyoshin said. Side hustle? This term sounded too technical, and neither Vast Lushness nor Gufei had heard of it. If he is hunting his marks outside the organization's knowledge, then what he did is called a side hustle. It's one of those things which is never spoken in front of the higher-ups but is unofficially acknowledged and condoned as a possible pursuit, Ziziyoshin explained. Chapter 355, Daohihi. You seem to know a lot about this. Gufei laughed dryly. Ziziyoshin ignored the sarcasm in his words as she continued, if they are truly from the same organization, then we are not out of the woods yet. If this is an order from the head of that organization, then it's a job that they must do no matter what, as failure to accomplish it will result in salary deduction and bonus cancellation. As such, they'll likely hunt you down even if it means risking their lives. They'll be more determined than an average player looking to park you. I really look forward to such a day, he said wistfully. He loved it when people would come and attempt to rob him. Not only could he perfectly justify slaying them, he would even make a name for himself as a righteous helper of his fellow man. Why would he not be happy about it? Violent Fey. She speechlessly stared at Gufei, who was slowly wiping his moonlit nightfalls by the boat's bow as he stood there. Amid their suspicions and guesses regarding that gang of robbers' identity, their boat bobbed with the waves on its way forward. After a while, a huge blurry form began to appear in the fog ahead of them. Gufei, Ziziyoshin, and Vast Lushness studied the form closely and felt gratified when they confirmed that it was undoubtedly land. We're finally here. Vast Lushness exhaled in relief. Ziziyoshin, for her part, glanced over to Gufei and asked, what's your park value right now? 36 points. He answered. He was naturally worried about this matter as well. The guards haven't come and tried to apprehend you all this while. Ziziyoshin was puzzled over this. Quite some time had passed since the conclusion of that fight earlier. If those guards were sent out the instant his park value hit 30 points, they should be in front of Gufei right now. I'm wondering about that myself. He sighed. Information over the sort of treatment players with over 30 park points would receive was scarce, as no one else besides Gufei had experienced it in Parallel World. There must be a certain range the guards can be sent out. I think they won't pursue you to the ends of the world, Vast Lushness opined. He nodded and expressed, I'll quickly erase my park value once I reach the shore. All the best. The two ladies gave their heartfelt well wishes. In this kind of atmosphere, the little wooden boat continued onward. The fog eventually cleared up and the three were finally able to make out what was in front of them. They saw the city of Linshui at the center of an island, its towering walls, and a squad of guards embarking on a watercraft by the harbor. The vessel looked far different from a normal ship and definitely nothing like the crude, handcrafted boat Gufei and the ladies were on. The design of the boat that they were on seemed to have been based off the fishing boats found in Jiangnan Water Township, with the end product looking like a misfit aberration in this Western-style MMO. As for the watercraft before them, Its design seemed to be based off from the three-mast dhow that was popular in the Mediterranean Sea during the medieval era. This type of watercraft could easily roam the entire Atlantic Ocean during the Age of Sail. Gouffet and Company's little wooden boat was simply inferior in every single metric. The sails on the watercraft unfurled grandly once the squad of guards boarded it. Whether there was a breeze or not, it was already making its way explosively toward the little boat of Gouffet and the ladies. "They're coming straight for me, huh?" Gouffet grimaced. The two ladies gave him a blank look. Did he even need to say that? The only difference these daunting guards clad in armor had with the guards in the other in-game cities was the water ripple symbol emblazoned on their shields, which easily identified them as hailing from Lin Shui City. "Quick! Let's escape!" Vast Lushness cried out as she started to turn around their little boat. "Can we circumvent them as we head for land?" He might be able to deal with these guards if they made it to land, but if they remained in the water, Gouffet would have no way of escaping them if they demonstrated their Earth Splitter skill on the boat itself. "It's going to be difficult." Vast Lushness, who was steering the small boat, came to this conclusion as she observed the speed at which the dhow was barreling toward them. The dhow was fast and its riggings allowed for really tight controls. It was unknown if this was another design that the system had shamelessly violated against normal convention. "Let's make a break for it first. Perhaps they'll stop their pursuit if we leave Lin Shui City's region." Vast Lushness adjusted the direction they were heading as she rowed the boat with all her might. Ocean was also hard at work. Instead, it was the initiator Gouffet, who was standing by the boat's stern, that did nothing. The three were depressed. Land was just right ahead, yet they were unable to enter it because a fugitive was aboard the boat. What made it worse was that their little, wooden boat's speed was infinitesimally insignificant compared to the dhow. The dhow drew ever closer to their boat without showing any signs of stopping, as though the two were hardly rowing the boat. The dhow was larger than their little boat in every aspect, so the three of them had to crane their necks to look at it now that it was before them. The guards were already at the dow's bow and they seemed to really be intending to show a earth splitter onto boat technique once they got to the appropriate distance. An idea popped up in Gouffet's mind the moment he saw the guards arrange themselves into a leaping formation. "Do you two know how to swim?" he asked. The ladies nodded. "Leap into the water the instant they unleash their attack," he instructed. "What about you?" the two asked him. "I've got an idea," he replied. The two ladies were unable to inquire further as the dhow finally got right up to their boat. Some of the guards on board even had their feet off the deck, just as Gouffet had expected. These guards would be using their Earth Splitter skill to leap even if they were in this kind of environment. "Quickly jump!" Before this shout left his mouth, the two ladies were already leaping into the water from either side of the boat. If the guard's Earth Splitter could even demolish a roof, how could this flimsy, little wooden boat withstand it? The first guard bore through the hull of the boat when he landed, penetrating through the wood with almost no resistance. The second, third, and fourth guards were all lining up to leap as well. Where was Gouffet? The two ladies leapt into the water while the first guard was midair. Gouffet, at that time, cast his blink and appeared millimeters above the water nearby as he tossed out that skyhook he had readied in his hand. Although he quickly plunged into the water in the next moment, his skyhook managed to snag the dow's gunwale. Gouffet tightly clung onto that rope as he felt himself get dragged underwater. Holding his breath, he proceeded to climb up the rope. If Gouffet were on board the boat, the guards would chase him to it. If he were in the water, they would pursue him in it. These guards' one-track mind was solely focused on accomplishing their task and would not show the slightest hesitation in their actions. The guards continued to jump off their ship, albeit they were no longer targeting the boat but the spot where Gouffet was, underwater. They were still using Earth Splitter, yet none of them was able to land atop Gouffet. He might be dangling on a rope in the water, but he was still moving. Furthermore, the AO damage of Earth Splitter was greatly weakened when applied on the water. After all, it was called Earth Splitter and not Water Splitter. Gouffet was beside himself with joy when he heard the consecutive splashes behind him. His plan worked perfectly. The guards were indeed as foolish as he had thought them to be. Gouffet finally swung himself to the side of the dhow. At the same time, he also managed to surface from the water. Gasping for air, He turned his head over to look. The guards demonstrated their superb swimming skills as they enthusiastically swam toward their target. He ignored them as he finally got himself to the hull of the ship. Grasping the rope and planting his feet on the hull, he easily scaled the side of the dhow. His nimble movement quickly got him halfway up. This was when he looked behind him again. The guards had also grabbed a hold of the rope Goofy used moments ago and began their ascent toward him. These guards are actually learning? He was surprised. As soon as he completed the second half of the climb, he leapt aboard the ship and mercilessly cut off the rope. A series of splashes could be heard as the guards plunged into the water once more. Goofy leaned over the gunwale and watched as the guards were unable to do anything, finally sighing in relief. Goofy had initially been worried that the shameless system would allow these guards to step on the water and unleash their Earth Splitter skill. Thankfully, they were not programmed to do that. He was admiring the sight of the guards struggling helplessly in the water when he remembered that Vastlushness and Ziziotion might still be in the water. He hurried over to the other side to take a look and saw that the two ladies were indeed still floating in the water. "Over here!" He called out to the two ladies, thinking that the guards should be unable to understand such a simple signal like this. The two ladies began to swim over to the dhow. Once they were near enough, he tossed a rope down and helped them up the dhow. The first thing these two ladies did once they were on board was to run over to the other side of the dhow to watch the guards flop around in the water. The mighty guards were actually in a rare situation where they could neither retreat nor advance. The three players took great pleasure in watching this. Bullying the system gave an even greater sense of achievement than bullying other players, as the system was considered to be an omnipotent god in a game. How do we sell this boat?" The three began to search through the dhow after they were done gloating. They quickly discovered the ship's cabin. A steering wheel. Haha, this is going to make things easier. Ziziotion rushed over to commandeer it. "Say, what do you think this vessel depends on to move?" Vastlushness had a look of a scientist on her. He pointed toward the cells that hung above their heads. "But there's no one right now," she said. "You'll be the one at a disadvantage if you attempt to talk logic with the system," Goofy said. He then went over to the side of the dhow to once more admire the guards treading the water aimlessly. There was no way he would get tired looking at this scene. At this same time, Ziziotion made a breakthrough regarding the rudder of the ship and attained full control of the helm. The three really enjoyed how shameless this system's dhow was. They did not know what was causing it to move, but they were more than satisfied to see it constantly head forward. Vastlushness, who had climbed all the way up to Crow's Nest of the dhow out of boredom, was now shouting to the two to join her. The Crow's Nest had a telescope, similar to a spyglass, attached to it. "Look over there." Vastlushness pushed the spyglass to the other two as she pointed in a certain direction. The two were able to make out the distant shadowy forms even without the assistance of the spyglass. Their experience of rowing a boat for an entire night allowed the two to identify those forms as little fishing boats that they were very familiar with. With the use of the spyglass, it became clearer that the 5 boats, with players unevenly distributed across each, were heading in the direction of the land by this side. "It's those guys," he announced after he used the spyglass. "I'll go change our course," Ziziotion excitedly cried out as she leapt off the Crow's Nest. "What for?" he shouted after her. "To deal a decisive blow to the forces of evil." The lady was already inside the cabin and was turning the dhow when she yelled this back. "Look over here too." Vastlushness adjusted the angle of the spyglass and beckoned Goofy over. Goofy crooked his neck and took a look, speechless. It was the group of guards that they had abandoned in the water. They were currently swimming after Goofy and their dhow. He was extremely moved by the level of professionalism that they were demonstrating right now. 180 degrees turn, targets straight ahead. Ziziotion shouted from the cabin. The dhow was cutting across the water crisply as it imposingly bore down on the 5 small, wooden boats. Chapter 356, Waves. The territorial waters of Linchui City stretched as far as the eyes could see. Goofy, as well as the two ladies, was on board the dhow. With the guards swimming after them, their dhow sailed straight into the party of pirates in front of them. They might seem to be in a pinch, but these 3 were actually delighting at the prospect of colliding with the 5 boats. The dhow was the true way to sail the winds and break the waves. There was no need to worry about those guards swimming after them. No matter how fast they swam, the Dao would always be out of their reach. As for the robbers in front of the three, their distance to them was getting closer with each passing moment. When those players saw the Dao coming to receive them, each of them suspected that they were seeing things. The players from Linshui City were no stranger to this type of ship, as plenty of them were moored in the city piers. Players had no means of commandeering them, nor were there any quests that involved these Daos. Simply put, they had never seen them in use before. These players could not wrap their heads around why the Dao before them had left the harbor, much less why it had even traveled so far out here. Could we have stumbled on a hidden quest? These bunch of players actually dreamed of such a serendipitous occasion happening to them. Whatever the case might be, the ship was still heading on a crash course toward them. They simply could not afford to crash into it, so these 5 small boats hurriedly rowed to scatter and give way to the Dao. They've scattered. Vast Lushness announced this from the crow's nest to Ziziyoshin, who was steering the ship inside the cabin. Bearing. Ziziyoshin shouted. About 10 degrees to the left. Vast Lushness answered. Understood. Ziziyoshin shouted her acknowledgement. Ziziyoshin turned the ship accordingly. She was an amateur at this, though, so there was no way she could turn precisely 10 degrees to the left. Similarly, Vast Lushness was not a professional navigator. Her shout of 10 degrees was a just rough estimation. This was why Vast Lushness immediately turned to shout, too much. You need to steer it back a little. Ziziyoshin hurriedly turned the helm in the opposite direction in a hurry even as she asked, how's this? Gufei, who was standing by the bow of the ship, witnessed these two ladies exchange words from above and below the ship. Their constant correction caused the ship to wobble from side to side as though it would split apart at any moment. When the bunch of players saw the Dao before them begin to shake left and right, they were unable to fathom what could be causing this. Some of them even went as far as to wonder what sort of super quest hint it was. Finally, a black-clothed mage finally entered their line of sight. It's that guy. Almost everyone uttered this same cry at the same time. Quickly, these men lost any good feeling about the Dao as they wondered how the mage had managed to gain control of one of the Daos found in the harbor. These pirates had always been coveting those Daos. By the looks of things, this act had pretty much affirmed that it was possible for players could commandeer such vessels. These pirates' thoughts were focused on this matter despite the precarious situation they were in. Ziziyoshin managed to steer the ship to imperiously rush toward these players. Although the Dao was unable to crash into some of the boats head-on, with the gap between these two types of watercrafts being akin to an elephant and an ant, just brushing any of the little boats to the side would instantly capsize it. Beautifully done. Vast Lushness gave Ziziyoshin a thumbs up. The Dao would bring along waves as it cut through the water, and just these waves alone were enough to violently rock the little boats. 3 players immediately found themselves falling into the water when they failed to steady themselves or grab a hold of anything in time. Ziziyoshin continued to steer the Dao, knocking boats and people alike. These pirates had always been capitalizing on their familiarity with this type of environment to bully those unfamiliar with it, but they had unwittingly met an even stronger foe today. They simply had no trick or plans up their sleeves to bully the Dao, let alone take it for their own. Vast Lushness acted as the lookout on the crow's nest, while Ziziyoshin blindly steered the ship. Everything was so chaotic that the pirates were unable to remain on their boats. The unlucky ones were able to cling onto the side of their boats after falling into the water, but the unlucky ones were swept away by the waves to who knew where. The dauntless guards had also caught up to the Dao at this point, but they ended up being tossed about by the waves Ziziyoshin had been making with her excessive steering. The players that ended up in the water were all miserable, while the 3 up on the Dao were now feeling tired as well after all their exertion. Ziziyoshin was really too much of a newbie at this. How could this watercraft change direction so frequently like this? The waves she had unintentionally created tossed the players about. Meanwhile, given the size of the Dao's hull, its collision with the small boats left them damaged them beyond repair. Although Gufei had spent many grueling years training up his lower body strength through Kung Fu, there was still a limit to how much could endure. His sense of balance had been thoroughly displaced that it only took a little fall to have him gliding around the deck with every movement. He would roll to the port side of the ship for a while before rolling to the starboard when the direction changed. He even found himself occasionally rolling up and down the deck laterally. The situation with Ziziyoshin in the cabin was somewhat different. She was tightly gripping the ship's steering wheel at first, but she eventually lost her grip of it during one of the more violent turns, causing her to slam at a very hard surface in the room that left her feeling dizzy afterward. The one who had it the worst was still Vast Lushness. She was standing at a pretty high place on the dowel, so, at one of the more violent lurches of it, she was instantly thrown off it. Thankfully, she reacted quickly and managed to grab a hold of the platform. Her body was currently swaying with the motion of the rocking dowel, suffering immensely as she tried to hold on. What made this hellish, however, was that everything was not over yet. After all, this boat was powered by some unknown source that kept it constantly sailing straight ahead. The three did not know which direction the dow's wheel ended up in, as it was simply turning around while the entire ship bobbed with the choppy waters rather intensely. Goofy slid from the port side of the deck all the way to the starboard and from the bow of the ship all the way to the stern. If this were to continue, this sailboat would no longer be a sailboat but would likely become a failboat one, instead. Right now, the most urgent matter for them was to steady the dow's wheel and steer it back to the proper position. On the crow's nest, Vast Lushness was not in the state to give direction. It would actually be considered a success if she could hold on and prevent herself from being flung off. When it came to controlling the ship's wheel, this responsibility naturally landed on that lady's Ocean, who was still helpless bumping around the cabin like a bumper car. Goofy continued to roll around the deck as he strove to look at the cabin's direction, wondering if the lady had knocked herself out and considered what measures should he take if that actually happened. He was about to call out to Ocean when one of his tumbles brought him near the cabin door. Coincidentally, this was when Ocean's figure was hurtled out of the cabin and ended up colliding into him. Before either of them could say a word regarding this situation, the dhow once more violently lurched and they were tossed to two opposite directions. Goofy could tell with a glance that it was useless to hope for Ocean's recovery, and he had to depend on himself in this current situation. Therefore, as he slid all around the deck, he seized the opportunity the next time he was rolling near the cabin entrance again. He then took that moment to cast Blink and materialized inside the cabin. Nonetheless, even inside the cabin, he would still be tossed around. Goofy proved to be more dexterous than Ocean, so he managed to reach out and grab a hold of the ship's steering wheel. Extending his leg out as he stuck out his back, his legs were able to find purchase on the side wall and his body ran parallel to the ground. Bravo! Goofy heard this cry at this very moment. He glanced outside the cabin entrance and saw Ocean holding a thumbs up at him. She coincidentally drifted past the cabin entrance. With all the vigorous rocking the entire ship was currently undergoing, Goofy momentarily did not dare to do anything since he did not know which direction was the correct one. Still, he did manage to steady the ship's wheel itself, so aside from bobbing with the motion of the waves, it finally stabilized in a certain heading direction. As long as he maintained this position, the situation should improve tremendously. He leapt off the wall and back onto the floorboards as he kept his hands tightly on the ship's steering wheel. After determining that the bow of the ship was constantly listing to the left, he began to turn the ship in the opposite direction bit by bit. The dhow was finally drifting in a straight line, and it soon steered out of this area with all the churning waves. Slowly, the ensuing bumps and waves became smaller and smaller. Ocean finally stopped sliding around the deck and gingerly climbed to her feet. She had been slipping and sliding and banging and knocking all over the ship's hard surface for such a long time. Though she was not dead from this, the entire experience had nevertheless left her lightheaded. Goofy did not dare to loosen his grip on the ship's steering wheel. He spotted Ocean getting up from the deck and swaying unsteadily toward the ship's main mast. When she reached that part of the dhow, she climbed up, got herself on the crow's nest, and pulled up the still dangling Vast Lushness. The two ladies sat down on the crow's nest as they sighed in relief. Neither had the strength to say a word, so they just sent Goofy a message. "How are things?" "Everything is fine. It's all under control," he answered. The ship was becoming steadier by the second. "Where are the others?" he asked the two on the crow's nest. He saw Vast Lushness shakily get up, raise the spyglass to her eyes, and look around. "I can't see them anymore. Who knows where the waves have thrown them?" Vast Lushness answered. She kept surveying the area around them with the spyglass until she spotted 2 rows of boats drifting about. "Let's seize this opportunity to get on shore." "Where's the land?" he asked. 40 degrees to the left," she answered. "I'll steer." Zaizayoshin seemed to have developed a passion for steering the ship. Don't. It's best you rest up for a while. He still had a bit of lingering fear when he recalled the situation that they were in mere moments ago. After Gufei successfully turned the ship around, they steadily made their way toward the harbor. Vastlushness continued to carefully observe their surroundings before confidently saying, I really can't find anyone out there. Forget about those guys. Those guards are sure to know our position. I reckon it won't be long before they catch up to us, Zaizayoshin said. What do you mean catch up to us? They can't possibly swim faster than a sailboat. We'll only get further and further away from them, Gufei refuted. He was rather amenable to the situation they were in, since it would give him more time to erase his troublesome park points. The dhow continued to sail toward land uneventfully. Linshui City's waterfront was filled with fine white sand like the one found in pristine beaches. The sun shone brightly as the unique aquatic monsters roamed about. This place looked to be an ideal spot for either level grinding or leisure gaming, and it was considered as one of the places in Linshui City where players would often gather. Although it was nearly the wee hours in the morning, everyone was staring wide-eyed as they saw the dhow sail closer and closer. Just like those water bandits, they believed that this watercraft was the same as those immobile ships moored in the pier. Is it some kind of a special quest? People by the shore were excitedly crowding round the shore, watching that dhow sail into the harbor. Back in the ship's cabin, Gufei was scratching his head as he asked the two ladies, do any of you know how to stop the ship? Chapter 357 First-time arrivals. More and more players gathered by the coastline, and each of them stared at the dhow sailing nearer and nearer. If they knew that the player steering the ship had not found any means to stop it, they would surely regret their decision to welcome its arrival. Reality was indeed cruel. Gufei never found any gear that worked like brakes in the cabin. Naturally, he got no answer when he asked the two ladies. Helpless, Gufei could only turn the dhow as much as he could toward one direction in order to avoid grounding the ship right onto the coast where many players were standing. Zaizayoshin and Vastlushness also tried to help. Standing on the crow's nest, the two kept signaling the spectators by waving their arms about as they called out, "Make way! Make way!" The crowd that had gathered by the coast was boisterous. Adding in the sound of the crashing waves and the strong breeze, no one could make out what the two ladies were shouting about. Still, their act of waving drew quite the attention from the crowd, with the sharpshooters among them using eagle eye to look at the two ladies before excitedly announcing, "Babes! Two babes!" Someone added, "What's going on?" Everyone asked pressingly. The crowd's curiosity only made them more excited, and no one moved to leave. In fact, many of them stepped closer to the shore as some fearlessly stepped into the water. These players became anxiously when they saw the dhow turning away from their location. The ships trying to escape. They pointed at the ship as they raced toward where Gufei was steering it to avoid running aground. This was precisely what was meant from the old saying, "A punishment from the heavens can be avoided, but there is no salvation for those who provoke the disaster onto themselves." Gufei was already turning the ship's wheel as much as he could, and any more would send them back into the waters they just left. Seeing how passionate these players were, he felt that they would be far more disappointed if he turned back out at this point, so he let nature took its course, shouting to the two ladies as he exited the cabin, "Hey, come down and get ready to run. We are sure to be surrounded once we land." Gufei had plenty of experience being surrounded and scrutinized. That was why he had such a great understanding of this matter. Seeing this scene before him, there was no doubt in his mind that the ship would quickly be swarmed and surrounded by the crowd present. Coming. Zaizayoshin was the first to climb down. "Hey!" He heard Vastlushness when he did not see her follow along. It seemed she was busy with something on the crow's nest. "I'll be right there," Vastlushness answered. He saw her suddenly jerk her arm forcefully before she leapt off the crow's nest. He heard a pang sound and saw Vastlushness land jaw first before she cast heel on herself. Seeing that she was now holding something in her left hand, he was speechless. This lady had apparently broken off the spyglass that was originally fixed on the crow's nest. "Quickly flee!" Zaizayoshin had climbed down to the deck by now. The two ladies began to run toward the ship's stern. After running for several steps, they realized that Gufei was still standing where he was. "Quickly jump and we'll swim ashore." "Do you really wish to be surrounded?" The two beckoned him. "No, no, no. It was rare for Goofy to be anxious. "I don't know how to swim. But I have blank," he calmly added, "so you two should make your move first." The two ladies did not dawdle and quickly dashed toward the stern. By now, they could already feel that they were reaching shallow waters as the ship was no longer as buoyant as before. It even started to grind against the seashore sand. Leaping any later might cause them to eat a mouthful of turgid sand, instead. Although Goofy did not intend to jump into the water, he also made his way toward the stern of the dhow just as the ladies dived into the water to the left and right respectively. Water splashed as they plunged into it. Moments later, their heads surfaced and they waved their hands to him. By now, the dhow was already shaking violently. The dhow became a lot less stable once it got closer to land. He had his one hand on the handrail as his other waved back toward the ladies. He then watched the two swim toward the shore. Goofy was on the deck holding onto the hand railing for dear life as the ship violently rocked. The players below did not see him, partly because they were busy discussing just what could have prompted the two beautiful ladies to jump down from the crow's nest. What kind of situation would cause one to climb down and the other to leap off like that? Among the players awaiting the ship's arrival, some realized that something was not right. How would such a large ship like this stop? While Goofy and the ladies were unable to think of how, plenty of players in the crowd knew. How could one stop the ship? With an anchor, of course. The astute sharpshooters among the crowd already realized that the anchor of the ship was still hanging by its side, completely without any signs of being dropped despite the closeness of the dhow to the coast. Those experienced sailors could tell that the ship was already considered as beached and that only inertia was causing it to move forward still. No one knew who it was that screamed, but the crowd began to flee from the area upon hearing it. Nevertheless, a few slow-witted players continued to look at the crow's nest, trying to make sense of the two ladies' actions. What were the two ladies trying to say when one of them jumped off while another climbed down? It was these players that were hit the worst when the ship came crashing in. Those who had been knocked over were considered rather lucky. The ones who had it worse were those that got pinned down under the dhow. This was only possible thanks to the soft sand found on the beach. At first, some did not realize this as they crowded around the grounded ship and sighed in awe. Only when some players among the crowd rushed out and cried out for help to break the hull, did the others realize that some people must have gotten stuck underneath the dhow. These pinned down players crazily fired off messages asking for aid to their friends. "Whoa! They aren't dead yet?" everyone exclaimed in shock. "Yes, how miraculous!" a black-clothed mage among them confirmed. The players looked at this mage incredulously. None of them had any impression of there being anyone standing where he was just now. "Don't just stand there and look, quickly come up with a solution," the black-clothed mage said. He then squeezed his way out of the crowd as though he were searching for a solution. The surrounding players cared not for the poor fools that had got pinned under the ship. Frankly speaking, they were more concerned about the whereabouts of the two babes that they had spotted on the crow's nest moments ago. This concern was not solely because of the two's enviable beauty but because the two were the only ones seen on the ship as it came in. The two ladies might be able to provide the important clues they needed if this was anything like a quest. While a portion of the players attempted to find a way to save the pinned down players, many more focused their efforts on finding out how to get on the deck meters above them. Meanwhile, that black-clothed mage, who had already made his way out of the crowd, quickly headed to a secluded corner to observe everything from afar. After quite a while, he finally spotted the two ladies sneakily making their way out. That black-clothed mage was of course Goofy. No one noticed that he was also on board the dhow, so he managed to blend into the crowd of onlookers with his blink. Many might have felt something off about his sudden appearance among them, but he knew that none of them would connect him to the ship. After taking a huge detour, the two ladies, who looked exceptionally bedraggled, finally rendezvoused with Goofy. Ocean once more had her cloak on, making her look no more than a shadowy figure as she beckoned the two to hurry. Besides Linshui City being surrounded by water, the city did not have any distinguishing features like Linian City. While it was a fortress built on an island, its architecture looked similar to the other in-game cities. "I'm off to erase my park value." He bid the two ladies goodbye. "I'll go and polish this spyglass a bit." The spyglass's connector was broken off when vast lushness forcefully pried it off the crow's nest, making it uneven and uncomfortable to hold. "See you two later." Zizioshin did not mention what she was about to do. The three went their separate ways under the city gate. Gufei asked for directions toward the bounty assignment hall from the passers-by. Vastlushness inquired where the players maintained sundry stalls. Zizioshin. She took off somewhere unknown. The three were already going about their business. Yet the incident that they had instigated was far from over. The players by the coast were busy. Some were digging a pit in the sand, while others formed up steps in the hole. After a short while, the dhow that was stuck in the sand lost its stability and collapsed on its side magnificently. This was very sudden. Thus, while they managed to rescue the ones trapped beneath the ship, even more unlucky individuals standing on that side got pinned down. Many of them even lost their lives this time. At the same time, every player present realized that not a soul was on board the ship. Was this a supernatural event? Everyone was inexplicably horrified. All of them continued to ponder on, study, and investigate. The first few people who discovered something were the sharpshooters with Eagle Eye. They pointed toward the water and asked, "Look, what's that?" Quickly after, all the sharpshooters began to sound off in awe as the other players anxiously waiting for them to explain their reaction. By the time every player present finally saw what it was all about, a new round of discussion had already begun. Countless Lin Shui city guards were swimming toward the shore. It was a phenomenon worth uncovering. What sort of quest is this? Such extravagance! They were all visibly excited. Everyone stared as the first guard made it to the shore. Everyone controlled their urge to clap as they watched that guard's every move. The guard did not actually do anything special, merely continuing to run as it transitioned seamlessly from swimming. The onlookers were ignored by the guard, who continued to run ahead unperturbed. Players who wished to hold him back and ask questions were trampled by that guard without losing a beat. The second, third, fourth. The guards kept making their way to the shore. The players did not know that these guards were related to the incident of the ship running aground, as each of these NPCs did not even look toward the ship's direction and merely did the same sequence of actions: get on the shore and run off. Anyone who tried to physically block their advancement was simply trampled on. There were still guards swimming toward their location even when the first guard made it into the city. What was going on exactly? Many players were mystified by this. Yet they still could not make sense of anything. Between trailing after these guards or continue to see what other things would come ashore, these players found it hard to choose. Either Gufei, who was clueless on how this event had troubled the onlookers, already completed 2 bounty mission and just picked up a target worth 2 park points. Completing this task would mean that his park value would once more be below 30 points. Chapter 358. Conditioned Reflex. Gufei was euphoric once he got the bounty mission that would help bring his park value below 30 points. Actually, what made him really elated was the prospect that he could log off once he completed this mission. While Gufei had a lot of fun playing Parallel World, as it had allowed him to enjoy utilizing his kung fu for fighting, he was always prudent when controlling his playtime. Actually, with the job he held and the kind of lifestyle he had, he could easily find more time to play the game, but he never did take the plunge. He always made sure to play the game for no more than 2 or 3 hours a day and to log off after he enjoyed himself fighting with Kung Fu. However, ever since he began following Traversing 4 Seas on this expedition, Gufei had repeatedly broken his self-imposed time limit for staying online. This was out of his hands, though. The game world had its rules. There were times where he had to abide by it. Otherwise, it would be truly difficult to continue living in on this VR world. Gufei could not help but think of the saying, "A man in Jianghu is no longer in control of his fate." He was not even in the real Jianghu but just some damnable game, yet there were several things he had to do because he had no other choice. Just take this current situation as an example. If he could not take this chance to erase his park value while the guards were still out in the sea, he would have to do what he did yesterday, and that was to first log off and deal with the problem the next day. Gufei did not believe he would be fortunate enough to have another crowd of onlookers interfering just like today in the future. He seriously doubted if he could clear his park points while the guards were chasing him and decided against taking such a risk. Thus, he thought it would be best for him to grab this chance and erase some of his park value until it was below 30 points. Coming to this decision, Gufei decided to extend his gaming session. Considering that his park value would be down to 29 points once he completed this newly obtained mission, he was already considering himself to be well and safe at this point. Whistling in a carefree manner, he glanced at the indicated coordinates before pushing the door of the bounty assignment hall to exit the building. A strong gust welcomed him. This was the strongest gust of wind Gufei had ever experienced since he started playing the game. At this same moment, he utilized his kung fu capability to the fullest for the first time since entering Parallel World. Dodging this gust of wind was a reaction he barely registered, a conditioned reflex born out of tempering his body from a young age by spending his every waking moment practicing kung fu. He even dreamed of it when asleep. This sort of conditioned reflex, which was imprinted onto every inch of his body, played a crucial role in this instant. Even Gufei was unaware that he had reacted. What a fast reaction! Unfortunately, no matter how quick his reaction speed was, there was a huge difference between facing a surprise attack and an expected assault. Furthermore, his actions did not become quicker just because his body reflexes set in. It could not be helped. He was still in Parallel World, after all, so his speed, just like the other players, would always be determined by stats. While his conditioned responses and reflex allowed him to react as quickly as he could, but no matter how quick he registered his thoughts, this movement was still bound by his stat allocation if he were to execute it accordingly. While Gufei was fast due to his current stat point distribution, he was still slower against a sudden attack that could bring forth such a strong gust of wind. Even if he were to possess superhuman reaction speed and judgment, there was no way he could have completely avoiding all of this attack. Managing to avoid a portion of the attack meant that a part of him still got hit. Gufei lost his balance, but he did not fall. As long as it was possible, he would never fall. Although that gust of wind dropped his HP to the red, he still managed to stay upright despite having to take several steps backward to do so. The second gust was already on him. This time, however, he was prepared, and his reaction was no slower than before, so he was able to dodge the attack in its entirety. Simultaneously, he was able to identify who his attacker was: NPC guard. The NPC guards were indeed as unrestrained as Gufei had pegged them to be. These two slashes were just basic attacks, yet the speed and strength contained within were unlike anything he had ever seen. This sort of attack was even more difficult to manage than their Earth Splitter skill. Earth Splitter required its user to leap into the air, land, and take the appropriate pose. Time would be wasted as each step is executed accordingly. In comparison, a basic attack was just a swing of the sword. The damage, AO, and relevant stats behind it were nowhere as powerful as a skill, but it was a lot crispier, cleaner, and more accurate. The simplest of moves was often the most efficient. This terminology that kung fu practitioners would often mention was actually reflected in the guard's actions right now. Gufei was indeed a true maestro as he was still able to grasp the intricacies of the current situation. This was just a damn AI. There was no way it could possess such level of kung fu mastery. Only one explanation would suffice as to how it was able to create such an effect. The gap in strength between this NPC and him was simply too wide. With such a huge disparity between the two, complex moves would be redundant. Perhaps, the damage would still be the same when applied, yet it would be nowhere as efficient as a simple move. Such a complex idea had only flashed through his mind for a fleeting moment when the enemy's third attack came on him again. A slash. Another one. Another one. This was the third attack the guard had dished out toward him. Besides the suddenness of the first attack, which he could not fully defend from, he was successful in evading the other two that followed. He was even a little excited after observing the situation he was in. There was only one guard before him. Gufei could easily understand how this had come to be. Who would have any idea where the choppy waves would bring them to? Therefore, their subsequent journey toward his location from different places meant that some would reach him earlier than the rest. This NPC had been the first to make it to him, but the other guards were quite possibly still adrift back in the sea. He might not be entirely defenseless against a guard. Gufei was confident, ignoring the fact that his HP was already in the red and that even the slightest touch from the guard would likely send him to his grave. The fourth slash from the guard arrived shortly after. It was a strike that brought a long buffeting wind. Just as how the Saint Seians would put it, the same move won't work on us twice. Gufei might not be a Saint Seian, but this was already the fourth slash he had faced. He already started to counterattack the moment the guard raised his arm to attack. The sword came crashing down on him with a strong wind gust, yet he had already dodged to the side. Twin incineration. He widely cleaved downward. The clanking of metal resounded when his sword made contact with the guard's shield, just like when he had clashed with the guards before. With the NPC guards having a ridiculously fast hand speed, their reaction time would surely be nothing slower. Gu Fei did not recover his strike, though. His sword swept across the shield with a flick of his wrist, transforming this side cut to the shield into a pierce as he immediately punctured the guard's waist. Incinerate. He finally completed the incantation at this point. The system for spellcasting in Parallel World allowed the caster to space the initial chant that called forth the spell and the activation command to a certain degree. The usual mages that focused on ranged attack would not think too much about this aspect of spellcasting, but for a close combat mage like Gu Fei, this design let his attack become even more prodigious. A kung fu move was nothing as simple as the slash from the guard. Every move withheld the potential to adapt and transform accordingly with numerous follow-ups. What was more, humans would surely not be as rigid when it came to their thinking like the A.I.'S, so there was no need to say just how tricky Gu Fei's one strike was. This sword stroke that he had delivered made use of a simple transformation. To find this gap in its defense and critically injure the NPC, he fooled it into raising its shield to defend. Adding the spell incantation at the same time, he was able to deal an indomitable attack of his own. When that guard took that sword into himself and it angrily cleaved an attack toward him, he once more dodged to the side. He then reached out his left hand and electricity arched in wild brilliance. Palm of Thunder. Gu Fei had not seriously unleashed this skill in combat before. This skill allowed its user to gather lightning at the center of his or her palm and to unleash it into a palm-sized attack with one thrust. Simply put, it could be used as a lightning spell that directly shot out in a straight line. Moreover, besides the spell's ability to be fired off from a different location unlike the other lightning spells, this skill had another unique aspect. It needed to be unleashed with an open palm. However, if a mage kept his magic staff when casting the spell, the subsequent spell damage would be significantly reduced. The game designers considered this point and, thus, included an additional condition: it must be cast with a non-dominant hand. Actually, it had another unique feature, and that was the fact that lightning needed to accumulate in the user's palm first. This particular aspect was incongruent with the characteristics of other lightning spells, which were nearly instantaneous when cast, so it was considerably stronger than the average spells from the lightning affinity tree. Still, this spell was not so powerful that it could annihilate the heavens. In truth, the spell was not a special skill and was merely a reward for a level 40 quest, and finding it in the market was easy. However, any spell would need re-evaluation once it fell into the hands of Gu Fei. While Palm of Thunder was considered to be a ranged attack, it actually became a close-ranged attack when he was the one using it. Focusing the lightning in the palm and delivering that single palm strike at the perfect moment. Gu Fei's kung fu was not merely limited to just weapons, he had mastery over mini palm, fist, and kick styles, too. This one palm strike he did was equally as precise and simple as a slash of a sword. The moment his palm connected to the guard, he unleashed Palm of Thunder. Being a ranged attack did not mean its damage would be weakened just because the caster was at close range. Numerous monsters fell to this one strike when he was experimenting with it. Gu Fei's usage of this skill attached a new value to this spell. With his dominant hand dealing twin incineration from his moonlit nightfalls, and his non-dominant hand blasting forth Palm of Thunder in close range, Gu Fei's close combat mage strongly resembled a berserker's dual-wielding mastery. And to top it off, his non-dominant hand attack was not subjected to any damage reduction at all. Chapter 359, Killing with a Borrowed Knife. Crackling in blinding sparks, Gu Fei sent his Palm of Thunder toward the guard's waist the moment he finished concentrating on his left hand. Just like any other lighting spells, the sound effect for this one was deafening as it created a shaft of electricity that arced forth. He thought to himself how disappointing it would be if the guard did not fall to the ground, considering how spectacular the visual effects for this spell were. Obviously, the guard did not collapse to the ground so easily, and it even quickly retaliated with a slash of its sword. Gu Fei turned his body to dodge the attack, and at the moment that he was about to counterattack, the guard used a skill. It was this one skill that caused him to feel the futility of challenging the guard, as he would have no way of achieving victory over an NPC with it. This skill was something he had seen being used by unscrupulous players many times before. Holy Healing. Silvermoon had used this same skill when Young Master's elite group was up against Silvermoon group in the Mercenary PvP tournament. It was a level 40 skill that knights had access to once they advanced their job class into a Holy Knight. It had about the same efficacy as a Priest's Heal but had a slight dissimilarity. A Priest's Heal worked on all job classes indiscriminately, be it bestowing on other players or themselves. The effect of the spell was entirely the same. As for a Holy Knight's Holy Healing, its greatest effect was when used on themselves, and next was when it is used on a fellow Holy Knight. Using it on other job classes would see a huge reduction in its efficacy. Further testing shows that Holy Healing had zero effect on the two advanced job classes of Assassins and Hunters, and that using it on Dark Knights or Dark Priests would actually deal damage to them instead. Holy Healing was the only current skill that had many different effects depending on the type of recipient. After the guard's sword hit empty air, it instantly raised its shield and white light came forth from it before dispersing. The pose was somewhat different from how players did it, but any sharp-eyed players could tell that the guard had just unleashed the heal skill. How could Gufei fight on at this rate? Against the werewolves, Gufei was still able to use sacred flames of baptism to nullify their regeneration. This guard, meanwhile, had a skill that let it instantly recover its HP. Could he interrupt the casting? Gufei attacked to see if that would work. Gufei unleashed 2 successive attacks powered by spells, and when the guard looked as though it was about to cast heal on itself again, he hurriedly stabbed it with his sword. According to the system rules, heal was a sustained spell that could be interrupted when the user was attacked during casting. This stab he dealt was quick. In the best case scenario, his attack would interrupt the sword if it managed to connect to the guard. In the end, the guard raised its shield to block his sword while lifting its weapon high, resulting into a glorious flash of white light that scattered from the blade. The shield that blocked Gufei's slash was pulled back to its body, as the guard finished basking in the white light with nary a point of HP lost. "I'm impressed." Gufei flashed the guard a thumbs up and no longer bothered to fight it, turning tail to flee. There was really no way to triumph over the NPC when the system was this shameless. The guard's heal appeared to have the powerful effect of a priest and the speed of a Holy Knight's Holy Healing. Gufei wondered now if he could interrupt the guard's casting by spitting on its face. Whatever the case might be, he still managed to garner the respect and admiration of the nearby players with that exchange. Against the tyrannical guards sent by the system, just what sort of god would able to last several rounds against it and retaliate a number of times that the guard would be forced to use its healing skill twice? As the players were thinking of this, Gufei unexpectedly stopped fighting the guard and fled. The emotions of these players instantly turned sour. They thought that he was a hero, but he was actually just a sloppy worker. Superscript 1. Gufei bounded away in a trail of dust with that guard closely pursuing him. He actually felt really frustrated at the moment, as he had used up all his mana in that fight without considering a backup plan. Thus, he hatefully griped about the system's shameless use of the healing skills. Had he known that this would be the result of fighting the guard, he would have at least reserved enough mana to use Blink. Right now, the distance between the two parties was no more than 3 meters. The guard would gain a bit on him by a few centimeters with every step, so running was by no means a solution. How he missed the nosiness of the crowd right now. However, a brief glance at those players watching his fight with the guard just then made him realize that no intervention would be originating from them this time, just from the way they eyed him disdainfully. What was more was that he did not know where the nearest log-off point was located in Linshui City. The guard was sure to catch up to him if he continued to run wildly through the streets like this. Turning his focus on a way to extricate him from his current predicament, his last hope appeared in the form of the bounty mission he had just obtained. Gufei, who was racing against time, was overjoyed when he checked the current target's coordinates with his Windchaser's emblem. The target was actually very close to his location, and he would probably bump into the person at the next intersection. He bowed his head and madly sprinted forward. A player appeared to the intersection several steps later, his serial number floating above his head. However, This person was not coming toward Gufei but was instead turning in the same direction he also happened to be heading. Realizing this would take some time, Gufei looked over his shoulder, saw the danger closing in on him, and decided to take a risk. He hollered, "Hey, bro! You there in front! Wait up!" Countless players were ahead, and each of them looked backward when they heard his shout, but none of them saw someone they recognized. However, they easily registered the eye-catching scene of Gufei fleeing from the pursuing guard. This was considered a monstrous crime, an offense that most players did not have the guts to commit. Everyone craned their necks to look, wondering just who Gufei was shouting at. The fact that his target also stopped his steps was enough for Gufei to celebrate, but he was afraid that that was not enough to get his attention, so he pointed directly to the man and said, "Wait up, bro." "Mission? Me?" The man pointed to himself. "Yes, you." Gufei nodded his head vigorously. "You're not being pursued but is actually on a mission?" Everyone was surprised. "What sort of mission is this? I've never seen it before," plenty of players muttered. Some even got near to Gufei's bounty target as they nudged their eyebrows with interest. "Hey, bro, what sort of mission is this?" "I don't know, either." The man was nonplussed. While this conversation was going, Gufei had already made it to the man. This person innocently gazed at him as he asked, "What mission are you talking about?" Gufei felt somewhat reluctant to strike when he saw the look of naivety on his face. However, he easily cleared past this middle block as he announced the answer to the player, "Bounty mission." Compared to the other times where he would announce this with laudable temerity, Gufei sounded all kinds of detestable right now. The expression on everyone who heard this changed drastically. The man was nationally aware that he had park value on him. The man almost fainted when he heard Gufei's answer, but he was shocked by this man's act of yelling at him to stop before rushing over to kill him off. He had never met anyone who would do bounty mission in such a manner. Gufei's sword had already lashed out by this point. He was already out of mana at this point. The cost of using Twin Incineration and Palm of Thunder twice was enough to drain him entirely. He could not even cast Thunderbolt or Fireball at this point, and all he could do was to unleash basic attacks. To make matters worse, it just so happened that this target Gufei had gotten was a warrior with plenty of HP and was by no means as defenseless as a priest. Gufei whipped his sword out as he took a quick glance behind him. The guard also had his sword raised at the same time. Given how he had no means to insta-kill the warrior in front of him, this meant that he was now stuck in a 1 versus 2 fight. This was now a fight that required his fullest concentration. He reminded himself of this as he continued to lift the sword in his hand before he froze momentarily. He turned his head backward once more. His head turned back and forth between the two guards. He felt lightheaded for a moment. He was certain that the guard was behind him. It would definitely attack him pronto if it managed to catch up to him. However, this one before him, this was definitely still the player who was his bounty target, but this warrior actually had a shield in his left hand and a sword in his right hand, and was even dressed just like a guard. Did this player have the strength to dress like this, or was he just cosplaying? Gufei had no time to ponder on this because the warrior had already struck charge. It was the skill that warriors always use to begin any PvP. However, this warrior had actually placed his shield before him as he used charge. It was not that Gufei had never seen guardians use charge with their shields held before them, but those guardians would not often have a sword in their non-dominant hand. Dual-wielding mastery was a berserker skill. Guardians did not have access to that skill. This warrior had a shield up and a sword hidden behind it, bringing in an attack while defending. There could only be one meaning to this: this player was not an average player but was an expert. Instead, initially, Gufei did not take this person seriously, thinking that the NPC was the one he should guard against. But the moment this man revealed this attack, Gufei knew he would have difficulty evading his attack than the guard's sword slash. Whether the sword would poke out from the left and right of the shield would change things immensely, impacting his decision on which direction to dodge. Uncertain if it was going left or right, He decided not to chance it. He halted his attack and suddenly stooped low and rolled. No one could fully describe just how fast his roll was. This roll was not just a casual roll but something he had trained and had a certain level of profundity. Only by grasping every aspect of this would anyone be able to roll like how he did in a fast yet dashing way. The warriors had naturally not seen such a fluid roll as well. He only saw the person before him suddenly disappear. Thinking that the mage had squatted down, he hurriedly pressed his shield lower. However, Gufei had already rolled past his feet. Fuck me. What sort of shameless fighting style is that? This person had plenty of battles that notched his belt, and he had never seen someone do something like this. He could only react instinctively by plunging his sword down toward Gufei. The sword was perfectly positioned for a forward thrust, so for him to suddenly plunge it downward like this, it made the attack extremely uncomfortable and awkward. In the end, before his sword could shoot out, he already received a heavy blow right onto his head. Following this, dizziness and nausea overwhelmed him. He lifted his head to look and saw the guard with its sword raised. It was not looking at him but at the shameless man by his feet. "I'm terribly sorry." He did not know when the shameless man had rolled right under his feet. The mage leapt to his feet and patted his shoulders when he said this. He turned around and was about to say something, but he felt a breeze waft through his neck accompanied by a shaft of lightning flash. He was truly quite indomitable to have survived the guard's one slash. However, with what little HP he had left, an attack that procced the additional magic attack was all that was needed to send this poor warrior into prison without even making head or tail of what had just happened. That might have been a little too despicable. Gufei sighed. Borrowing the guard's attack to take down this warrior, Gufei patted his Winchester's emblem and disappeared instantly. Chapter 360, a friend with his park value once more down to 29 points. He was pretty much safe from the pursuit guards as long as he kept himself out of their line of sight. Teleporting himself back to the bounty assignment hall with the use of Winchester's emblem, Gufei entered the establishment and gingerly asked for the location of the nearest spawn point before running off toward it to log out. In the meantime, the other mercenaries of Young Master's Elite were enjoying a short break in one of Linshui City's taverns. "Miles isn't here yet?" "He should have reached the city by now, right? I'll send him a message." Brother Assist was still talking when he saw Gufei's name suddenly dim, a clear indication that the man had logged off. Tut tut tut. Although Gufei was not around, those present still derided his practice of logging off early. "Why isn't your friend here yet?" War Without Wounds asked as he leaned his neck out toward the tavern doors after he finished ridiculing Gufei. He seemed to really be looking forward to this meeting. "I'll ask again." Brother Assist sent out another message, yet his expression changed with that. "What happened?" the other four men asked. "He's not in a serviceable area," he answered in a daze. The four men were astounded by his reply. "To actually send such an expert to prison, only one person I know is capable of doing that," Brother Assist carefully said. "That's not necessarily true. It's difficult to take on four men with just two hands. After all, no hero can survive a mob." "We're aware of how strong Miles is, yeah? I say if we all work together, that we should be able to stand a chance," War Without Wounds said. TSK. All of them expressed their heaviest contempt toward War Without Wounds. As peak experts in their own rights, they did not wish to share a table with him for saying something that lacked confidence. "Since he's in prison, let's just go there to visit him," Sword Demon suggested. "Let's." Brother Assist got up. "Who's paying the fee for the prison visit?" "Who?" War Without Wounds and Royal God Call hurriedly asked aloud. "He will." Young Master Han pointed his finger over to the door before turning it into a wave. "Guild Leader Ruthless? Oh, you guys are here as well." Oathless Sword just happened to walk into the tavern with his fellow brother Gale Force. After extricating everyone out of the quagmire that they got themselves in back in Linian City, Oathless Sword started to look favorably on Young Master's Elite. The ferry ride was rather uneventful and gave them plenty of chances to bond. Oathless Sword even went as far as to express his concern for Gufei's safety and well-being. "What are you doing here, Guild Leader Ruthless?" Young Master Han enthusiastically addressed him. Oathless Sword happily came to them. "We've only arrived at the city, so I figured it's best to walk around and try to get a better hand of the situation. The tavern is indeed a good place to gather information." Young Master Han nodded. Of course, Oathless Sword happily agreed. Have you gentlemen been here for long? We just got here ourselves, but we are planning to head out and visit a friend, young Master Han shared. A friend? Oathless Sword muttered to himself, feeling rather surprised by this new information. These gentlemen before him were peak experts in their respective fields in MMOs. After all, anyone that they would make an effort to visit would surely be quite the character. We'll leave you to your business then, Guild Leader Ruthless. We'll take our leave first. Young Master Han gestured for the others to get up. As the five stood up, one even passionately said, "Great, Guild Leader Ruthless can take our seats." With that, these men slowly made their way toward the exit. Their hearts were filled with expectations as they figured out young Master Han's intention. "Hey, gentlemen!" Oathless Sword caught up to them before they stepped out. The five men turned their heads over to innocently regard him. "What's the matter?" Young Master Han was naturally the one with the most clueless and innocent expression among them. "It seems I won't find anything useful here, so why don't I follow you guys to meet your friend? Get rowdy with everyone?" Oathless Sword suggested. "I don't think meeting him will be a problem, but I'm afraid we won't be able to get rowdy at all," young Master Han said. "Why not?" Oathless Sword was perplexed. "Because our friend is currently in prison," young Master Han replied. "Ah!" Oathless Sword was shocked. Since this friend of theirs was in prison, it would be odd for strangers to visit him. This also implied that the person might not be someone outstanding. Oathless Sword was contemplating this matter when young Master Han suddenly quipped, "But I do agree that Guild Leader Oathless should visit this friend of ours." "Oh, just who is this guy?" Oathless Sword asked. "Come, let's discuss this matter on our way there," young Master Han invited. "Guild Leader Oathless, don't you think that our trip from Linian City over to Linshui City had been a little strange?" Young Master Han immediately changed the topic once he started speaking on their way over. Oathless Sword could not make sense of this sudden query, so he could only answer accordingly. "Is something the matter?" "Look." Young Master Han began to break down the matter to him. "From Yanjuan City to Liyue City, we face the Erodajulong mountain range with a pack of mountain bandits blocking our way forward at the end. From Liyue City to Beishi City, there were werewolves that were supposed to act as our roadblock. Then, on our trip from Beishi City to Linian City, we became the targets of Deep Waters and his men's competitive quest. Based on these three incidents, we can say that every city has a sort of stage for us to clear. The first 3 times happened on our journey to the next city. This time, our trip from Linian City to Linshui City did not even have any event cropping up." "That's true." In that case, Oathless Sword was beginning to have an idea as to what young Master Han was getting at. "If nothing happens even until we leave Linshui City, won't that mean that our trip from Linian City to here is devoid of any trial from the system? Do you think that the system is considerate enough to give us a free pass here?" young Master Han asked. "Of course not." Oathless Sword immediately spat. Everyone was well aware of just how shameless the system in Parallel World was, so none of them was foolish enough to think that anything it did would be beneficial to them. Following that line of thinking, then something is bound to happen the moment we retrieve Todd from the prison and leave Linshui City? Oathless Sword asked. Young Master Han nodded solemnly. That must be the case. Oathless Sword furrowed his brows and bit on his nails. So I suggest you come with us to meet our friend, young Master Han said. What do you mean? They five did not mention the identity of this friend of theirs. Now that the topic had rounded back to this, Oathless Sword was a little unclear what they meant. We believe our friend can help you as long as it involves Linshui City, young Master Han answered. Oh. Oathless Sword somewhat got what he meant. It sounded as if this person were the tyrant in this part, just like him in Yanjuan City. Oathless Sword would also be the ideal candidate to help foreigners if they were to come to Yanjuan City looking for something. I got it. Let's go, then. Oathless Sword hurried. The 7 players quickened their pace and quickly arrived at Linshui City's prison. How many of you? After filling out the form for prison visit, the guard asked for their head count. 7. Brother Assist turned to look, as if to double check the count as he reached for his coin pouch. Hey, how can you do this? Let me. Oathless Sword rushed forward to stop the Dark Knight. Young Master Han turned his head to the side at this very moment, revealing a delighted smile. Reaching this point, The men from Young Master's Elite somewhat felt guilty at this. Oathless Sword was not exactly a miser and was in fact quite an honorable person. He just happened to be the leader of a large guild traversing 4 seas, so he often behaved in a somewhat arrogant or overbearing manner, making it difficult for people to tolerate him. However, at this moment, Oathless Sword was not trying to be snobbish and was actually humbly offering to shoulder the fee for the prison visit. Faced with such a forthright person, they ended up forgetting themselves as they vied for the honor of paying the fee. Everyone waved their coin pouches about in their eagerness to pay, yet none was able to emerge as the ultimate victor in this struggle. Sword Demon eventually shrank to a corner and said, "Enough, let's all pay for ourselves, then." "That won't do. Let me." Oathless Sword took advantage of everyone's momentary shock to shove his coin pouch into the prison guard's hand. Naturally, the prison guard did not care for whom the coins belonged. As long as the amount was right, all of them could visit a prisoner. Stepping into the prison, the 7 players instantly knew that this trip was not a waste. Although Linshui City looked the same as the other in-game cities, it was actually hiding an unexpected uniqueness. Linshui City's prison was actually a dungeon. The passageway that the 7 men were currently in was actually above each cell. The cell was entirely walled off, with a metal grating placed on the ceiling of each cell. All the convicted players were beneath the 7 men's feet right now. The 7 men lowered their heads and found yet another unique feature. The level of the water in each cell was actually adjusted in accordance to the player's height. No matter who was inside the cell, the water would stop right at their chest level. This could be said to be one outstanding aspect of this VR game. If this were a real-life dungeon, it would be immensely difficult to adjust the water level for each individual. The 7 of them hurriedly passed several cells, only seeing a handful of players jailed. It could be seen just how powerfully sapping this experience was for the players, causing the park incident in the city to be relatively low. Nobody should mistakenly believe that a stint of being submerged in this dungeon was as comfortable as lying in a bathtub filled with warm water. There should be no need to mention just how terrible it was to soak in the water for several hours. What was worse was that the prisoner could not sit down while inside the dungeon, much less lie down. This was precisely what made this dungeon horrifying. As there were few prisoners in the dungeon, the 7 men quickly located Brother Assist's friend. Obviously, just like the other convicts that were soaked in the water, Brother Assist's friend wore a glum expression on his face. Even when he saw them, his grim expression remained unchanged. "You're all here," the man listlessly said. "Hey, how did this happen?" Brother Assist asked. "Damn it, I met an utterly shameless cad." The man spat. "What happened?" Brother Assist asked. "A man came running straight to me while being chased by an NPC guard and shouted something about a mission. I couldn't understand what he meant, so I naturally asked him what was going on the moment he reached me. It turned out that it was a bounty mission with me as the target. I quickly found myself unceremoniously slain by the guard chasing after him soon after." He narrated this while half submerged in water. The men from Young Master's Elite could feel their hearts shuddering at this. Shouting out bounty mission sounded so much like Goofy's style. What did the man look like? Brother Assist could feel his heart going up his throat as he asked this. "He looks like a mage, but I don't remember seeing him casting a spell. It was mainly the guard's sword that killed me before he brushed me with something from behind his back." "Oh, yes. He used a sword, wearing a black mage robe, and his final attack seemed to contain lightning," the man described. "The video mage?" Brother Assist asked. The man looked as if he had a sudden realization. "That's right. That man looks just like that video mage." Everyone could only grimace when they heard that.